This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. It has been a while since we did the last program, but now I'm back from Europe, and the world hasn't changed for the better, that's for sure. It's gotten worse. It's gotten much worse. We've heard a lot about the peace deal in Gaza. We heard about attempts to bring about peace in the Russian-Ukrainian debacle. All these events are doomed to fail. That is something we need to keep in mind. They are doomed to fail. An interesting article was published by Israel 365 News on October 15, saying this: President Donald Trump's speech at the Knesset last week marked a significant and monumental moment for Israel, one that celebrated the remarkable deal that freed all the live hostages as a first step, something that Hamas never agreed to in past deals. Yet, as grand as the speech was, it still misses one crucial, undeniable truth: it won't bring peace. The reality is that a mere pause in hostilities does not equate to peace. It doesn't directly address the fundamental issue that has plagued this region for over a millennium: the ideological and religious jihadist agenda that calls for the obliteration of Israel and the Islamic takeover of the world. If Trump and Netanyahu truly wanted to establish a lasting peace in the Middle East, their plan would have focused on something even more transformative and spiritually resonant: the expansion of Israel to encompass its rightful biblical borders, protect all the minorities in the region also persecuted by jihadi Islam, and the one powerful act of rebuilding the Third Temple in Jerusalem. What message would it send to the Muslim world if, as part of a peace plan, Trump and Netanyahu announced a plan to not only expand Israel's borders, but to restore the holiest site in Judaism, the Third Temple? A rebuilt temple in Jerusalem would be a clear signal to the Muslim world that the Jews are back in full force, not just as a temporary fixture or a historical relic, but as a powerful, sovereign nation reclaiming its rightful place on the world stage. Such a monumental step would have made it clear that the Jewish people are not going anywhere. I will come back to the issue of the Third Temple, but let me say right now that the Third Temple is going to be built in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount prior to Christ's return. The Bible is very clear on that prophecy. Now, some say when the Bible talks about the temple, it just talks about the church. It also talks about the church as a spiritual temple, but there are many scriptures you cannot explain away by spiritualizing the clear content and the clear expression. When it comes to the Russian-Ukrainian situation, Trump, ever changing his positions, recently said that he would want to talk with Putin, that they were supposed to meet in Hungary, but now the meeting was put on hold after a telephone call between Marco Rubio and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, which was a very productive phone call, Trump said, but it couldn't have been that productive if the meeting now is not going to take place. And then, of course, you have, going back to Hamas and the Gaza Strip, the situation where a deal was made with Hamas, a terrorist organization with many murderers and other criminals in their ranks. And of course, we all welcome the fact that hostages were released, but they also were supposed to hand over dead bodies, which they haven't done yet, at least not all of them. But it's also talking about the fact that Hamas is supposed to lay down their weapons. They said they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. And so how is that going to be a peace deal with any lasting success? Hamas is already out there persecuting now Palestinians. The last exchange which took place, freed a person who became the leader of Hamas and who was instrumental for the October massacre. These are the kind of people this exchange has set free. Almost 2,000 of them for the hostages. They're not going to go away anywhere peacefully. We should all understand that. So that is not going to be a situation which will bring peace. And let me just say this. The Bible makes it very clear that there's not going to be any peace in either the Gaza Strip or the Middle East. The Bible tells you the exact opposite. And the Bible also makes it very clear there's not going to be any peaceful solution between Russia and Ukraine, in that you have two nations who are kind of antagonistic towards each other. No, the Bible says they're all going to combine. It's going to be one great big power block. And so every attempt right now to prevent this from happening is not going to be successful. When I talk about domestic issues, one thing which is very clear is the ICE misconduct. Here's an article which was published by the Rutherford Institute on October 15. It was written by an attorney who is actually running this Rutherford Institute, and the Ron Paul Institute republished the article. It's a very lengthy article. I just want to give you a few excerpts from it. It says, masked gunmen, tasers, tear gas, pepper spray, unmarked vehicles, intimidation tactics, brutality, racial profiling, children traumatized, families terrorized, journalists targeted, citizens detained, disabled individuals, minors, the elderly, pregnant women, military veterans, snatched off the streets, private property destroyed. This is not a war zone. This is what now passes for law and order, policing by ICE agents in Trump's America, and it's not making America safer or greater. What began as an agency tasked with enforcing immigration law has metastasized into a domestic terror force. It is how a dictatorship behaves when it decides the rule of law, in this case the Bill of Rights, is optional. Nationally, more than 70% of individuals rounded up by ICE nationally have no criminal convictions. Many have lived in the United States for decades, raised families, paid taxes, contributed to the economy, and worked the jobs most Americans refuse to do. And even Trump admitted that. But you see, then he listened to the wrong people. First, he wanted to have at least exceptions for those workers, and then he listened to his advisors, and then he changed his mind again. Americans didn't vote for him to have ICE behave in such an illegal way. And so Trump may pay dearly at the midterm elections. Ted Cruz has warned that that might happen. He also has warned recently that MAGA should not ignore those demonstrations. 7 million so far last weekend against having a king in America. Now the White House came back with some ridiculous explanation as to why we don't have a king in America, but Trump himself posted a video on his social network in which he is portrayed as a pilot with a crown on his head, putting manure on demonstrators in New York. And so the question is, what does this all mean? Trump is wasting his time and his efforts on projects which are doomed to fail. Whether it's Gaza, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, whether it's the tariffs, the deals which were made are not worth the paper many times they're written on, or whether it's immigration. Now, he was successful when it came to the border situation, but not when it comes to what is happening internally. The country is being torn apart. Civil war may break out. And so people have been asking the question, is Trump going to leave after his second term? And more feel that he is not going to leave after his second term. The Mirror wrote on October 22, Donald Trump has no intention of ever leaving the White House. That seems like a weird thing to suggest, but there is now so much evidence pointing to him trying to cling on to power beyond the end of his legal presidential term that it is irresponsible to pretend it's not happening. He keeps saying he's not a king or a dictator, but he also keeps doing and saying things that suggest he very much would like to be, like this video he posted. Trump did exactly what he said he was going to do in his first term, or at least tried to. And this time he keeps saying he's going to stay in the White House beyond 2029, when his legal term ends. He's even made hats and given them out to Republican congressmen. He's repeatedly floated the idea of rewriting or bypassing constitutional rules that prevent him serving beyond 2 terms. During a visit to the White House by Zelensky in August, Trump indicated he likes the idea of using a war to cancel the next election, allowing him to stay in power beyond his term limit. Zelensky canceled an election in Ukraine because his country is at war with Russia. So let me just say, 3.5 years from now, so you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Trump said. Later, during his visit, Trump showed Zelensky the White House gift shop, where Trump 2028 hats are on sale. Of course, the article has several additional factors, some not that convincing, some manufactured. I believe what I quoted, though, to you right now is most striking. Steve Bannon just announced last week that Trump's 3rd term is already planned. Now that brings me back to the 3rd temple. During his first term, he spoke a lot about building or helping to build the 3rd temple. There were coins printed with Cyrus and Trump and the 3rd temple on it and on them. And Trump was compared with Cyrus, who, of course, restored the 2nd temple. Trump even allegedly asked a Jewish delegation, how much time do I have to build the 3rd temple? Now, during his 2nd term, you don't hear an awful lot about the 3rd temple unless things are being done away from public view. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. I believe that Trump is in power, amongst other things, for the purpose of helping to build the 3rd temple, which is an absolute necessity for the return of Jesus Christ. And if I were to speak to Trump personally, and if Trump were to listen to me personally, which of course I don't think is going to happen, I would tell him this: don't waste your time on projects which are doomed to fail. Do what you're supposed to be doing. Help building the 3rd temple in Jerusalem. And if that means you stay in power longer than the 2 terms, whatever it takes, build the 3rd temple. You see, that is what you're supposed to be doing. I've been saying that Trump would be back. People have accused me of, how can I say this? Well, I was right, wasn't I? I have also said that under Biden, the 3rd temple is not going to be built. Oh, but how can you say that? Well, it wasn't built, was it? So I was right again. And so I believe strongly that Trump is there to fulfill that biblical prophecy, the mandated biblical prophecy, to build the 3rd temple. Now let me also say this. If Trump fails in this endeavor, he can be easily replaced. God can replace him any time. King Saul failed, and he was replaced by King David. King David was not allowed to build the temple because he was a bloody man, a man who had fought wars. And so only Solomon, his son, was allowed to build the temple. So God can easily do that. Mr. Trump, Mr. President, here's your chance, here's your obligation, here's your responsibility. Fulfill it. Do what you're supposed to be doing. And you will thereby help accelerating the return of Jesus Christ. Thank you very much for listening. This is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch Board.
Standing Watch is a presentation by the Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.